This is Merton and Malcolm, Monday the 22nd of February on BBC One.
What are you doing for Red Nose Day?
I'm going to wear the most layers of coat ever.
I am going to stuff my pants with the most noses.
I intend to break the world record for using the most swear words on TV ever, starting now.
Fundraising action packs are available now, stuffed with loads of ideas to help you make this a record-breaking Red Nose Day. Just phone 0891 900 000.
FA Cup football in 20 minutes. Match of the day follows the news and sport now on BBC One with Peter Sissons and Helen Rollison.
There are growing signs tonight that Libya is ready at last to agree the arrangements for putting the Lockerbie suspects on trial. The two suspects would be tried in the Netherlands under Scottish law and, if convicted, be jailed in Scotland. The government acts to end the confusion over genetically modified foods, insisting all those on sale are safe. And a victory for sportsmanship in the FA Cup as Arsenal agree to a replay after grabbing a controversial winner. Good evening. A flurry of diplomatic activity tonight suggests that at long last there's been a breakthrough with Libya in bringing to trial the two men suspected of the Lockerbie bombing. Within the last half hour, the Foreign Secretary Robin Cook said in a statement, "At long last it looks as if we could be approaching the end game." It appears that the Libyans are now ready to accept the deal designed by Britain and the United States, which provides for the suspects, if found guilty, to be imprisoned in Scotland.
Nobody can be sure that the two men accused of the Lockerbie bombing will stand trial at this Dutch airbase until their plane arrives in the Netherlands. But those who've been trying to persuade Libya to let its citizens be tried here by 3 Scottish judges are more confident now than they've ever been. Colonel Gaddafi of Libya has been negotiating face-to-face with the United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan. Britain is expecting Kofi Annan to pass on Libya's response within the next 24 hours. Nelson Mandela has also been working towards a deal, as the South African president told Tony Blair last month. The word from both Libya and South Africa today was identical and optimistic.
We are happy to be able to announce that positive results were achieved in these discussions and that common understanding was reached on all the outstanding matters.
It's just over 10 years since a Pan Am jet exploded over the Scottish town of Lockerbie. 270 people were killed. 2 Libyans have been accused of the murders. It seems that Libya has finally agreed that if Alamin Khalifa Fahima and Abdul Basit Ali Mohammed al-Megrahi are convicted, they should serve their sentences in Scotland.
My understanding is that all of those obstacles had been surmounted until today, with the exception of the question of where imprisonment would be served. And if that issue has now been resolved, then I can see no further obstacle to the plan which I put forward in January 1994 now being implemented.
Robin Cook, who's been to the Netherlands to inspect the trial location himself, is adamant that the men must serve their sentences in Scotland if convicted. But the breakthrough seems to have come when Mr. Cook agreed that United Nations observers could go to Barlinnie prison in Glasgow and monitor the conditions under which the suspects would serve their sentences. The Foreign Secretary said tonight, "I am more encouraged than before that we could see justice done in a court trial." He said, "It's been 7 months of hard effort, but at last it looks as if we could be approaching the end game." The wreckage of Pan Am 103 has been carefully preserved in the hope that it might someday be used in evidence. Next year, perhaps, 2 men may stand trial before a Scottish court on foreign soil, accused of the worst terrorist outrage in the entire history of civil aviation. Joshua Rosenberg, BBC News.
The government insisted today that genetically modified food products are safe to eat. The Cabinet Office Minister, Jack Cunningham, said such foods on sale in supermarkets had all been properly and rigorously tested. Britain's retailers had urged the government in a letter to make its position clear after concerns raised by the latest scientific research.
Despite assurances to the contrary, shoppers today confirmed what retailers describe as the huge public concern over whether it really is safe to eat genetically modified food.
To go and buy something that you don't know if the scares are right, that it's causing cancer and things like that, then people have got a right to know.
We don't know what we're eating today, and I think genetically modified anything is bad, and you can't interfere with nature all the time.
Having fended off calls for a 3-year ban on the sale of GM products, today's letter increased pressure on the government to make its position crystal clear. The BRC warns that it's not enough to wait for the Food Standards Agency to allay concerns, and it urges ministers to put consumers' minds at rest. Retailers say they could lose billions of pounds if another food scare like the BSE crisis is allowed to develop.
They've been conspicuous by their absence in this whole debate, and that's why we're saying end that today, stand up and be counted, and make a statement either one way or the other. Either you're still satisfied with the scientific evidence or you're not.
The minister responsible for biotechnology insists that GM products are safe to eat.
I'm absolutely confident that products which have been thoroughly tested and rigorously assessed and have been approved for sale and are on supermarket shelves today are safe for people to eat.
Besides supermarkets, smaller retailers have also raised concerns about the long-term impact of GM foods.
We're dissatisfied with statements by the government so far because they lack conviction. And who's to say that consumers may not take it upon themselves because of some side effects on genetically modified food, take it upon themselves to sue small businesses and bankrupt thousands of them whose public liability insurance just won't cover them for it.
After a week in which public confidence in genetically modified food has reached rock bottom, supermarkets say they've been inundated with calls from consumers concerned and confused about which products contain genetically modified ingredients and which don't. At present, there's no requirement to list GM additives in full, and the European Commission is not expected to publish new proposals on labelling until June. But supermarkets here say they'll look at ways of making labels more informative. Denise Mahoney, BBC News.
President Clinton says he's ready to send up to 4,000 American troops to Kosovo to join a peacekeeping force if a peace deal is reached. NATO has been pressing America to make a decision about its involvement. Today, thousands of ethnic Albanians from all over Europe gathered at Rambouillet Castle near Paris to support their negotiators.
From mid-morning, they wandered through the narrow streets. Thousands of ethnic Albanians bussed in from all over Europe, arriving in Rambouillet to demonstrate their support for the peace talks and remind negotiators their ultimate goal must be independence for Kosovo. It was an invasion that came as no surprise to the French riot police. From early on, they cordoned off the streets near the chateau. On no account was this display of grassroots enthusiasm to disrupt negotiations. You only have to compare the small crowd of Serbs who were here yesterday to this massive gathering to understand the difference of approach to these Kosovo peace talks. If the Serbs are wary, for these ethnic Albanians, this represents the best hope for Kosovo, even if it's not immediate independence.
I want to what the peoples on Kosovo want, the independence of Kosovo, not to live in the Serbia.
We fight for our country and we want to be free.
Among those present, 2 American members of Congress. They'd been encouraged by talks this morning with the ethnic Albanian delegation and had a warning for Yugoslavia's President Slobodan Milosevic.
NATO is a reality. NATO will be in the region, whether Mr. Milosevic likes it or not. Either there is an agreement here at Rambouillet which will include NATO troops on the ground, or if there is no agreement and Mr. Milosevic is the one blocking the agreement, then NATO is prepared to strike.
For the moment, though, all attention remains focused here on Rambouillet. Tomorrow's meeting of foreign ministers is expected to extend the talks. The question is, will another week be enough to unblock them? Bridget Kendall, BBC News, Rambouillet, France.
3 more British men have gone on trial in Yemen, accused of terrorist offences. They appeared in court alongside 5 other Britons who've already been charged with plotting a bombing campaign in the country.
2 weeks after being arrested, the 3 Britons were finally brought to court, not having seen a lawyer once while in custody. State prosecutors took the unusual step of adding them to the trial of 5 Britons facing similar allegations, despite the fact that the case had already begun. In court, the 3 Britons were accused of being part of an armed gang intent on sabotage. The 2 Birmingham men said they were both innocent, but Mohammed Kamil admitted the charge. He was just about to be questioned about his confession when a lawyer arrived to represent the new defendants. She strongly objected to Kamil giving evidence, saying he didn't know his legal rights and should now have the chance to retract his statement. Kamil is the son of Abu Hamza, the leader of an Islamic fundamentalist group based in London, whose extradition is now being sought by the Yemeni government. He's accused of being a key figure in a plot to launch a terrorist campaign in Yemen. The 5 Britons already on trial and the 3 new defendants are accused of planning to blow up a number of Western targets in Aden. The Anglican Church was on the list, along with the British consulate. Today's developments in Aden were followed closely by Britain's Consul General. Whatever the guilt or innocence of the men, there are bound to be more questions about the way the trial is being conducted. Peter Gould, BBC News, Yemen.
The Conservative leader William Hague is on his way back from the United States, where he's been exchanging ideas with leading right-wing politicians. But his trip has been overshadowed by President Clinton's political fortunes and by the political problems of his Republican hosts.
Virtually everywhere he's been in the United States, William Hague has been met by a Republican host in a spot of trouble. But his reception has been warm.
Thank you very much indeed for your hospitality this morning and for the apple. It shows how you've made everything very clear in New York.
But for the mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, it's not as clear as it might seem. He's at the center of a storm after his police opened fire on an unarmed West African. In spite of the row, Mr. Hague was still keen to learn the secret of the mayor's success in bringing down crime. But he admits translating American ideas into new policies for the Tory party won't be easy.
I don't imagine that there are policies you can just take from the United States and immediately implement in the United Kingdom. But we share a lot of the same problems, and some of these solutions will be applicable in some ways to the United Kingdom.
There wasn't much inspiration to be found earlier in the trip in Washington on Capitol Hill, where Republicans were in low spirits after failing to remove President Clinton. But in Texas, it was a different story.
Hey, welcome. How are you? Good to see you, sir. Glad you're here.
Governor George W. Bush is the Republicans' front-runner for next year's presidential elections. He's the architect of what's come to be known as compassionate conservatism, and he's just been re-elected on a landslide. Mr. Bush suggested this recipe could work for his visitor.
He's got a very bright vision for his country, and that he's philosophically grounded and understands the challenges faced by the Conservative Party, but isn't going to give up.
The timing may have been unfortunate, but William Hague's confident this trip hasn't been in vain. He's made himself known to American politicians. He's discussed ideas, and he's tapped into the experience of Republicans who are actually running some of America's most important cities and states. John Kampfner, BBC News at New York City Hall.
Now, with news of an unprecedented gesture by the winning side in an FA Cup tie and the rest of today's sport, here's Helen Rollison.
Thank you, Peter. After an extraordinary incident in the FA Cup 5th round tie between holders Arsenal and Sheffield United, the Football Association has agreed that the match should be replayed, despite Arsenal ending the game 2-1 winners. The goal that put them in front was followed by angry appeals from the Sheffield United players. They claimed Arsenal had failed to observe the accepted sporting code following an injury to a United player. Play was held up for 6 minutes as the Sheffield United manager Steve Bruce appeared ready to take the players off the field. Afterwards, though, Arsenal's coach Arsene Wenger offered to replay the game, a suggestion that was accepted by the FA. The full story will be on Match of the Day immediately after this programme, plus highlights of the cup ties at Leeds, Sheffield Wednesday and Huddersfield. If you don't want to know the results of those games, look away now. Everton, who are struggling to score in the Premiership, won their 5th round match with Coventry at Goodison Park. 18-year-old Francis Jeffers put them on their way after just 13 minutes. The game ended 2-1. Barnsley are also through to the quarter-finals after a 4-1 victory over 2nd Division Bristol Rovers. Midfielder Craig Hignett with the hat-trick. Meanwhile, there were just 2 matches in the FA Carling Premiership. Charlton were impressive in their home win over Liverpool. John Barnes came off the bench for Charlton, but it was Keith Jones who scored the only goal in the 70th minute. Liverpool had been reduced to 10 men 2 minutes earlier when Jamie Carragher was sent off. Frank Lampard got the second of West Ham's 2 in a scrappy game against bottom-of-the-table Nottingham Forest. The Hammers won 2-1, a move above Wimbledon to 8th in the table. There were also 6 ties in the 4th round of the Tennent's Scottish Cup, and viewers in Scotland can see the games between Celtic and Dunfermline and Livingston and St Johnstone after the news on Sports Scene. If you don't want to know those scores, then please look away again. In the other matches, there were wins for Ayr, Greenock Morton, Motherwell and Falkirk. Rangers play at Hamilton tomorrow. The holders, Sheffield Eagles, are out of Rugby League's Silk Cut Challenge Cup. They were beaten 16-6 by Salford Reds in today's 4th round. And in Rugby Union, Leicester extended their lead to 6 points at the top of Allied Dunbar Premiership 1 after a convincing 31-10 victory over London Irish at Welford Road.
With 6 players having left the club, this is a very different Sheffield Eagles side to the one that beat Wigan to secure the Challenge Cup last year. Even so, their new-look outfit thrived in the opening moments against Salford and took the lead when fullback Faisal Savatabur's classic break was rounded off by Great Britain's centre Keith Senior. But following a disappointing Super League season, which they finished next to bottom, the Reds have also made changes. They deserved more sooner, but trailing 6-2 midway through the second half, they finally got their reward when debutant Hudson Smith, one of 11 new recruits, brought the scores level with a brilliant individual try. The momentum was clearly with Andy Gregory's rebuilt side, and just 8 minutes later, the Eagles' tentative hold on the trophy was loosened completely. Scott Martin cut through their by now dishevelled defence to put Salford on the way to a convincing win. Elsewhere, a near-perfect display from fly-half Joel Stransky, who kicked 21 points in their win over London Irish, put Leicester in a thoroughly dominant position at the top of Allied Dunbar Premiership 1. Leicester also managed a couple of tries, this their first from David Lockie just before the break. Brendan Venter scored a consolation try for the Exiles, but their brave title challenge, which had brought 9 wins on the spin, is surely over. Paul Gray, BBC News.
England's cricketers are on their way home now after finishing their tour in the worst possible way with their second ever biggest one-day defeat. They were completely outplayed by Australia, who won the second day-night final by 162 runs in Melbourne.
England made it difficult for themselves from the start. Slack bowling and even worse fielding, letting Australia race away in the early overs. Brutal hitting from Ricky Ponting set the tone and pace of the whole innings as a big total was built. And a late spurt from Shane Lee helped set England a target of 273. But the writing was soon on the wall, with Knight already gone after a run-out, Hick holed out in the deep. Hussain stayed in the middle for just 1 ball, and Fairbrother went quickly 2 for a duck. 13 for 4, with the captain looking on helpless. Stewart, with 32, led a suggestion of a fight back, but when he lost his head, providing catching practice for the Aussies, the cause was lost. It was now a matter of the degree of humiliation. Australia's captain Shane Warne wrapped things up to win the match by 162 runs and take the series. England's tour down under ending as it began, second best by a worryingly wide margin. Steve McCormack, BBC News.
And Ken Doherty is through to tomorrow's Snooker Masters final at Wimbledon.